how did I end up here? Oh, a few days ago I had the bright idea to get back into sort of proper fitness and maybe lose a little bit of weight, and I always find that's best done with short amounts of exercise every day. That's great. So I've had 3 runs in 3 days, and then I thought, oh, I know, I'll jump on the bike and maybe shoot the intro to my video as well. And that's how come it's 7 in the morning. I'm freezing cold. Oh, I can't feel my fingers at all. Can't tell you how much I'd rather have just stayed in bed though. But the good news is, I only just started. In 5 minutes I'll have warmed up a bit, and then maybe I'll get to enjoy the sunrise. I'm pleased I came out, but the weather is not what I ordered. And it's windy too. Did I mention it's windy? It's now officially past dawn. Lovely morning to be out on the bike. Need to get home and talk about how Britain's gonna go 0 carbon by 2050. Whoa, net carbon I mean. With, as far as I can tell, no concrete plan to achieve it. That's what you get from this government. Windy! I tell you, it's the getting out in the countryside that I reckon is the best bit of cycling. You see, running doesn't really take you that far, so cycling is just better in that respect. And you can actually use it as a valid method of transport, which of course, you know, helps get to that net 0 carbon. Okay. So now the sun's up properly. This has been quite a damp ride. That was fun. Pleased I did it. Oh, I love exercise. Such a good way to start the day. Okay. Right, I need to head off to home base quickly. And then I'm gonna drop my girlfriend at her flat. She's got some DIY to do. And then, you know, I just need to get going. So, the government has recently announced it wants to get to net 0 by 2050, which is great. And it's got a bit of a plan to do this. It's encouraging the uptake of electric cars. Well, that's a bit of a no-brainer. And moving away from gas boilers to heat pumps, which I think is brilliant. At the end of gas boilers would be fantastic as far as I'm concerned. And I do have a sort of a slight personal interest in the gas boiler thing, because my mum is building a house and she would quite like to have an air source heat pump, but they are extraordinarily expensive at the moment. And I don't know if she'll get any of this grant. I think they've come up with an up to £5,000 grant for people. I think it's replacing old gas boilers, but potentially maybe for new builds as well, depending on what kind of new build it is. I'm not sure. We'll have to wait and see. I don't think the details are sort of fully released on that yet, and it is something which is going to be a sort of not available before April anyway. So, which actually works out fine for my mum, because they haven't even broken ground on the house. So yeah, I mean, that'll be an interesting one to watch over the sort of coming year. See if my mum actually does manage to get this air source heat pump installed, and whether it works well. I mean, the problem with air source heat pumps is the whole heating system needs to be sort of designed for them. You need bigger radiators because they don't produce water that is as hot, that sort of thing. You need to have very well insulated house. I mean, basically you're turning your house into an inside out fridge, which is cool. Obviously the great advantage is you power them from electricity, and that electricity can come from anywhere. It can come from the sun, it can come from wind, it can come from tides or geothermal or hydroelectric. So, you know, it can also come from coal, it can come from nuclear, which is actually, from a carbon point of view, just fine and dandy. Coal is obviously awful from a carbon point of view, so hopefully it won't come from that. But yeah, I mean, you know, that's going to be a big thing, hopefully. I mean, honestly, do I think we can do it? I think net zero is going to be very tricky. You know, we consume a huge amount of stuff. Yep, home-based supplies are purchased, so we'll pick this up at the next available pause in my day. It's yeah, this is just sort of one of those things, isn't it? I'm just sort of fitting things in as I go. V has been dropped at her flat. She's busy working away. I'm busy squeezing myself into the car and going home to walk some dogs. I've really struggled with motivation the last few years. Oh, Albie, you're getting in my... tying me up with lead. Yeah, really struggled, as I'm sure everyone can tell, with all those times that I've been like, yes, I'm going back to daily vlogging, and then it's not happened. Now, exercise does really help. So today, I'm, you know, having a fantastic day. And hopefully I'll be super motivated and get loads of stuff done, although I do have Jasper with me, so, you know, what with it being half term and everything, I probably won't get that much done. Either way, it's just, exercise in the morning seems to be a really good idea for me. It really gives me the motivation to sort of make progress with life. And that brings me on to this whole climate change situation. So I think the UK government's announcement a few days ago was principally driven by the desire to have something impressive to brag about at COP26, which is being held in Glasgow, I believe, very shortly. But although that's partly what's motivating it, I think the other thing that's motivating it is that we get a lot of floods around here. And we seem to get a lot more floods these days than we ever used to. And the cynic in me thinks that, you know, climate change, that could have something to do with that. So it's slowly but surely becoming something that people are more and more motivated to fix, the current climate situation. Uh-oh, I'm tied up with lead again. Yeah, so I would let Albie off the lead, but he's not yet ready for that. He needs to get a bit more used to this sort of environment. By the way, no, he is not my dog. He is V's dog. I'm just dog sitting for a few days while she completes her renovations. So I mean, the motivation to do something serious about climate change is definitely increasing all the time amongst governments and corporations and the wider public as well. The question is, what are we going to do? And is it going to be enough? Hang on, I need to do a slow-mo. So back home now. Yeah, with the heat pump thing, it's sort of, a large part of the problem is that the funding is, I think, totally insufficient, what the UK government has come up with. And as if that wasn't bad enough, you've got the insulation side of the equation, which, I mean, that's what these the Insulate Britain people have been blocking roads about, is the fact that people, and by the way, I don't agree at all with that kind of protest. I think people should protest about it, just not in a way that is dangerous and honestly quite counterproductive, although I suppose it does raise awareness, but nonetheless, there is clearly a massive shortfall in terms of the funding for, you know, getting people to properly insulate their homes in this country. Not to mention actually putting in the boilers. I think there's only enough funding for something like 30,000 heat pump installations a year, which is, you know, a tiny fraction of what it would need to be. And the funding for all of this is going to be a bit of a sticking point too, because the government's used most of its money, quite honestly, and, you know, because of the pandemic and all the rest of it, and even the EU's not helped. So yeah, there's a little bit of a funding shortfall, and I don't know how it's going to work out. I really don't. I hope it does. I think the thing to look at when it comes to transitioning to renewable technology is it doesn't have to be an economic problem for the country. If they just outlaw anything that's not a heat pump in new buildings, new building projects, then what will happen is there'll be a lot of jobs created. Yeah, some people will lose their jobs or have to retrain to work on heat pumps instead of combi boilers, but there'll actually be a lot of investment in and around that, which will generate a lot of tax revenue and, and ultimately keep the whole sort of cycle going. It's a bit like, it's like a lot of things with renewable technology, actually. If you go in for it wholeheartedly, then you can make it pay for itself by stimulating the economic activity, stimulating the investment in businesses and innovative manufacturing, companies that will be producing, whether it's solar panels or heat pumps or wind turbines. These businesses, they pay tax, they employ people, and it's oftentimes much better for the local economy than just sending tons of money off to the Middle East for their dead dinosaurs. So I do believe that funding for the kind of changes necessary to reach a net zero carbon by 2050 sort of target, I think that funding can be found. We're just going to have to be quite sort of innovative, I think, about how we do that. Of course, the terrible irony when it comes to funding is that the government seems to have wasted a huge amount of money on HS2, which I hope it is worth it, but it's starting to look like it probably won't be. What is the bill for HS2 up to now? I think it's like £120 billion. That's insane. Anyone would think they were trying to get people onto the surface of the moon. And I think I'd rather they spent the money on that, actually, because I think the knock-on technologies and companies that would be created for that would probably be much more beneficial to the wider society. Either way, personally, I would rather see them invested in space, of course, because I like space. And then, of course, you've got the irony of spending £27 billion upgrading the road infrastructure, which, yeah, it needs to be upgraded at least a little bit, but ultimately, I think there's going to have to be much more of a push towards people using cars only when they have to, and rather than just relying on them for everything. And I think that's where things like bicycles, actually, and cargo bikes becoming increasingly popular these days. I think there's definitely a place for these sorts of things to fill, especially the electrically assisted ones, which are obviously much more accessible to people who might not be able to get up a 10% gradient hill, in a cargo bike that doesn't have electric assistance. And of course, aviation, that does create quite a lot of emissions too, and we're going to need to do something with that. I think aviation is going to be a tough nut to crack, because batteries don't have the power density at the moment, and it will be a while, I think, before they do. I do think they're getting there, and I think the planes that use batteries to get about are likely to be somewhat different to the way current planes work, probably quite a lot shorter haul, probably quite a bit heavier with less passengers on, which you might think would be more inefficient. Of course, if it uses a huge amount less electricity, less energy to send that plane from A to B, the fact that it only has half the passengers becomes less of an issue, especially if that electricity is cheaper, so the ticket price doesn't go up through the roof, and the maintenance of the aircraft is easier and cheaper. One thing's for sure, we've got to do something, because I have noticed in my lifetime that the climate seems to have changed quite noticeably. The summers are a lot warmer, there's much less snow around in winter. When I was a kid, having a week of 30 degrees plus weather, it seemed like a really, really rare event, and now I expect it every year, and I think we've more or less had it every year. It's different. There seems to be far more storms, hurricanes. They seem to have increased in intensity. There's a lot more flooding. The rains, we get about the same amount of rain, maybe a bit more, but it seems to fall in much sort of tighter time periods. So you end up with things flooding. That's a problem we have quite a lot in the UK. So something's got to be done, or this could all get out of hand. I guess we'll just have to wait and see. Okay, so I'm going to take Jasper to the skate park now. That's basically it for the day. I don't know why, but I'm feeling a surge of motivation at the moment. So I'm going to try and make hay while the sun shines. I hope you've enjoyed today's vlog post. If you have, remember to leave a like and share it and subscribe if you haven't already. You can follow me on Instagram and Twitter. The links are in the description. And a big thank you to my Patreon supporters, as always. And I'll see you all in the next episode of my vlog. Bye.